France tightens religious clothing ban. Islamic Abayas banned in schools. In a bold move that has reignited fiery debates about religious freedom and secularism in France, Education Minister Gabriel Attal announced a ban on Islamic abayas in state schools. This decision, revealed during a television interview, amplifies the ongoing controversy initiated when hijabs were banned in schools. Attal asserted, quote, when you walk into a classroom, you shouldn't be able to identify the pupil's religion just based by looking at them. The French Council of Muslim Affairs, or CFCM for short, hit back, arguing that clothing is not a quote unquote religious sign. This latest ban, following prohibitions on hijabs in 2004 and full face veils in 2010, has unleashed a torrent of opinions across the political spectrum, exposing deep divides about the role of Islam in French society and the balance between upholding secular traditions and protecting civil liberties. With France's Muslim community, the largest in Europe, feeling targeted, the nation finds itself at a critical juncture, forced to reconcile with its past by its increasingly diverse present. So, Armin, what do you think about this move? Abayas
All right.
banned in state schools.
Okay, so okay, I will give you both sides, and you guys tell me what you think. Okay, so from the side of like, yeah, this is a good idea. I mean, if you could display your religion in class, then you're obviously using government money to advertise a certain viewpoint, and also teachers could discriminate based on who's in line with their religious teaching. And you want a teaching environment, especially if it's government funded, to be free from these biases and free, and where both children are being treated equally, right? So that's the argument for it, right? The argument against it is that you're going to make girls not be able to attend school and stay home and not get educated. However, I don't think France allows that. So
France
I
is
don't even know
super
what to.
strict against that kind of thing. That's my
All right.
understanding. I'm sure there are
R-
unfortunately probably people that fall through the cracks, but they don't like allow homeschooling or there's very, very
Okay.
tight controls on it, tighter than the United States. That's my understanding.
Okay. So, do we have any other arguments against this? Because that's the only thing I could come up with. Why? What do you think?
Well, the main criticism that people have brought forth with this ban is that the abaya is not inherently Islamic. They're like, who said that the abaya is Islamic? Like a lot of people just wear this form of clothing, like in our culture. Like what a
That's
it's
nonsense.
not
It's
inherent.
obviously
They
Islam.
argue that it's not inherently a religious symbol at all.
That's nonsense. It's kind of like wearing a cross and saying like, "Who says that's a cross? That's a T." That's how dumb that argument is. Obviously, it's Islamic. Like, oh, tell me, like, I'm just this. My name is Tina, and this is a T. It's not a cross. Come on, it's obviously Islamic.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's yeah.
Well, it brings up the broader question of I mean, this is a state school though, so that changes things heavily. But it brings up a broader question of how much authority and ability do we want the state as a project to have in its ability to directly dictate this
It's
kind of a
state
thing among
funded.
its citizens? That's a broader question.
It's it's a state funded school. I mean,
Mhm.
do we have private schools that people are allowed to have the hijab there in France? I think this is completely fine as long as you have private schools that you're allowed to wear whatever you want. I mean, I'm sure, doesn't France have Catholic schools?
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm pretty sure in Catholic schools in France, you're allowed to have the cross and all the other religious symbols, right? So if you have private schools, you could wear the hijab, you could wear the cross, you could wear that little Jewish thing on your head. What is that called? The kippah,
Kippa,
right? On
yeah.
the head, kippah. You could wear a turban if you're Sikh, okay? You do it in your private school. This is a religious funded school. I mean, religious. This is a government funded school, and the government is like, yeah, this is a secular country. We do not allow um, this being a platform. This platform that we have provided funding for for it to be used as promoting any kind of religion. I think that's completely fair. I mean, I don't know if doesn't France have private schools? Can somebody let us know in the live chat that you're allowed to do these things in private schools?
They do, but I know that the hijab is banned in schooling, in at least state schooling for children under the age of 18. I don't know
Right.
if it is allowed if it was a private Islamic school. And I do believe that there are very tight restrictions on Islamic private schools because France is dealing with this issue of like separatism from the republic, as they call it. So, to what extent is there a double standard? I'm not sure.
I mean, if it's below 18, having a burqa on children should be illegal anywhere, like outside of school, inside of school, even inside of your house. Putting a burqa on a child should be considered child abuse. That's not just a normal hijab. That's just like cover your face and everything. That is child abuse. I mean, we saw what the COVID masks did to children's social and speaking skills,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
that was just 2 years, right? Imagine the entirety of someone's childhood having their face covered if they go in public. That
Mm-hmm.
is definitely child abuse.
Well, no, the harm was less about children having their own faces covered and more about always seeing other people's faces covered,
Yeah,
especially for
but
very, very young children. That was the real harm.
I know, but we understand that importance of seeing someone's face to have bonding with them, to have an emotional connection with them.
Yeah.
So if you can't have an emotional connection with other people because you can't see their face, then that will be the same way with other people treating, like how you are not seen in society.
Mm,
People's minds associate your face with your personhood,
you're
with your
100% right.
Right. So if you are not seen in the public, then you are not seen. You're invisible. Your entire childhood, you're growing up and you're not being noticed as an individual in society. That is child abuse.
Yeah. I don't know. It's yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really tough because then I just with my political orientation or my instinct is just to wonder about giving the state the power to interfere in these kinds of things. But that's a much broader topic than just this specific form of dress. But
Yeah.
yeah, man. And people basically people don't realize that this applies to other religious symbols as well. So like children aren't allowed to have like giant crosses, they're not allowed to have the kippah in school, blah blah blah. They
All right.
France is taking a
Yeah.
very firm stance about promoting equality of the sexes within its country, and I'm in full support.
And it's so unfair that people just focusing on the Islamic ones, even though France is being consistent on banning all religion symbols in school. This is not uniquely an anti-Islam position. Okay, so the fact that people are being sensitive towards the Islamic ones shows how privileged Islamic views are in society compared to other religions.
You are not lying.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, this is actually shows the opposite. People are like, oh, people are more hateful towards Islam, but actually it shows the opposite. It shows that people are more more concerned about being anti-Islam. Islam enjoys more protection, given that people are not jumping into the defense of Sikhs or Christians or Jewish people. The people are not jumping in their defense. People are jumping in defense of Muslims. So you cannot cry victimhood when more people are defending you against this role than other religions. And also, so this comment that Dee highlighted, I wanted to read this one. It's saying, insecure Western so-called democracy wants to dictate to people what they can and cannot wear. This is not an accurate description of what's going on. Is it if you go to your work with shorts on, like a man that wants to wear shorts at work at the office, and your workplace says like, nope, you do not get to wear that here, right? Or with sandals. Like imagine if you want to go, you're working at the bank and you want to go work at the bank with your sandals on, and the bank is like, I'm sorry, we do not allow here. Is that against democracy? Is that against your freedom of expression? That's the rule for that specific environment. This is not against democracy. I don't understand what you're talking about. Is it against freedom of speech if I get fired from a government job because I swore against my employer? If I shouted like F words directly to his face and they fire me, should I say like, oh, what happened to your freedom of speech? These are specific conditions for specific environments. Another comment in support was saying, congratulations to France. Religion has no place in schools. Okay, so
There's
these are the comments.
one comment I wanted to address. So there's a comment by Zaid, and he raises a question that we kind of touched on, but he's saying, but what if Muslim parents deny their children education because of this? And this is a really
Well, you
important
can't.
question, because we can talk all we want about the principles of having this within a classroom space, but we need to be realistic and deeply consider the consequences, right? So my understanding is that France has very strict controls over this kind of thing. Now,
Mm,
if I learn more and learn that actually France does not have the ability to interfere and ensure that children are receiving education and are not being denied education by their parents, then I
right.
would have more qualms about this. So, for example, that is why I feel differently on this issue than the hijab ban that happened in Karnataka in India. Because in India, the state has way less ability to actually ensure that children are not being denied education by their families. Girls in India disproportionately drop out of school as soon as they get their period. Millions and millions and millions of girls stop going to school just because they get their period. So adding an additional layer of girls not being allowed to wear the hijab in classroom will make that much more difficult, which ultimately will harm the Muslim community. And more than harm the Muslim community, for the people that were fighting to ban the hijab, they were saying that they don't like it because it shows basically kind of like the strength of Islam and Islamic dominance and all this stuff. But girls that are educated are actually going to be much more likely to be way more liberal in their interpretation of Islam or leave it entirely, right? So it would actually be to their benefit to allow it for some period of time so that they have the ability to then be more independent and dictate what they want to do with their own life, right? And because there's already like no ability for the state to ensure that children are being educated, I think the consequences in that context is much more severe than the consequence of allowing the hijab in the classroom. So it might seem hypocritical to some people, but really I'm thinking about the consequences of this decision in that specific context. And at the end of the day, I'm concerned about the likelihood and ability for these girls to get educated, and that context changes some of those factors, right? So I personally don't believe that that's hypocritical. But it is a very genuine concern. And if because of this girls were being denied the ability to leave the house altogether,
Mm,
and there was no ability to interfere and intervene in that, then I wouldn't support this.
that
Does
makes
that make
sense. Yeah.
sense?
That makes complete sense. I
Okay.
agree with that. Yeah.
Um, do you mind if I go to the bathroom
Or
while you read some super chats? But
yes, yes.
um,
Actually, reading the super chats is a good opportunity for you to also use the washroom. Get a
yes,
washroom.
but I want to answer the super chat about FGM, so I'll be right back.
Okay, I will give my answer as before you come. Can you hear me while you're away? Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. Well put. Okay. There we go. All right. Let's go through the super chats. Susie wants to do the FGM one. So Prush, is that the super? Which one is the FGM one? Is that the third one? Okay, let me see. Prush is saying, thank you so much, Prush, for the super chat. Saying Muslims claim Abraham. Okay, Abraham means Abraham. Abraham built the Kaaba, but Jews say he never went to Saudi Arabia ever. Found it funny that Muslims completely made up a trip to Saudi. Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all for Abraham to just walk away all the way down there. It's too far away for Abraham just to go there for a visit to his son Ismail. It makes it's completely nonsensical. However, Prash, um, you should find the entire story of Abraham as a whole funny, because it's not just that trip that was made up. Abraham as a whole is a made up story. So yeah. So the Jewish people are also making up Abraham, to be fair. All right, another super chat by Prush. Thank you so much for the super chat saying, if trans surgeries under 18 can be allowed. Is this the one? Oh, yeah. So I'm going to leave this for last because so Susie is here. Gauging American with a $5 super chat is saying, when tech becomes advanced enough, would LED display masks that display a false avatar for anonymity be permissible? I'm sure it will be. I don't see how any. Oh, yeah, actually, I don't know. I think sure. Yeah, you're right. I think people who are saying that we shouldn't be covering our faces in public for security reasons, yeah, that might they might have it. Depends on the country, right? So it depends on the country, but I assume like yes, in some countries it would be illegal. Yeah, so it depends on what you're talking about. All right. So Susie is back right in time. So you want to read this question by Prash?
Yeah, Prash, thank you for the super chat. First of all, saying if trans surgeries under 18 can be allowed in the name of parental and child consent, can female circumcision also not be allowed by that logic? Okay, so female genital mutilation is internationally recognized as a human rights abuse. It is a unique form of sexual abuse of the child. It is sexual abuse. And it is gender based violence that is imbued in cultures that dictate and mandate the most severe forms of control over women in general, women's bodies in general, and women's sexuality in particular. And this happens in most cultures, even around the age of only a few days old to around the ages of 8, sometimes even older. And so there is no okay form of FGM because every single form of FGM, because there's even a practice called pricking where it's almost like just ceremonial. Every single form is dictating that a woman's sexuality is dangerous, needs to be excised, that it's dirty. Every single form of it dictates levels of shame and that it's I can't find the words that I'm looking for, but it's sexual abuse. It is. And it's domestic violence because it's mostly perpetuated and done by families. And it's gender-based violence. And those things are unacceptable. And which is different than the context of a child pursuing treatment for gender dysphoria, because those should be things that are articulated by the child itself, right? And it should be done without coercion. Because even if FGM was like allowed at a later age, blah, 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 I would have severe concerns about coercion from the community involved. So by the same token, any child pursuing this kind of treatment, it should be done without coercion or even necessarily certain forms of positive reinforcement. That's my opinion. I have a lot of opinions about this. I have actually a lot of skepticisms about this. But because I still want to find a lot more data before I start talking about it publicly, I'm not going to go out and make all these proclamations about the treatment of minors in a medical physical context for gender dysphoria, because I do have concerns. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't have concerns. But it's really not comparable to FGM.
Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.